Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to yet another A-Crew webinar. And I am delighted to be with Gerhard and Ben today. We've got two amazing companies lined up, DNV GL and Döhle Yachts, and a topic that's worth discussing because as I understand correctly, this needs to be arranged by January 1st, 2021. But before we start, Ben, how are you today? Where are you at the moment?
As I said, I'm sat in an office talking to myself in sunny Southampton. It's clouding over a bit at the moment, but it's good. It's good.
Yeah. And Gerhard, where are you at the moment?
Now I'm based in Hamburg and I stay in my office, and I'm very pleased to contribute a little bit to this nice session today.
Pleasure is ours. We're delighted to constantly have these great partners joining us for these topics. So I will do a formal introduction, and then Ben is going to do the first part of the webinar, and Gerhard will join him in the middle, and then we'll take the second part. We are recording this, which means that you can always look it back, and we would love to have your comments in the chat, any questions. And when we're starting with Ben, he's going to have some questions in the slide, so it would be much appreciated if you respond to them. It gives us good direction on where to go. John and Jennifer are wishing us all the best, saying hi and good afternoon. Same to you guys. So what are we doing today? Today we are doing our lunch and learn together with Döhle Yachts and DNV GL, and we're looking at the inventory of hazardous materials on superyachts. And we're asking ourselves a question: are you ready for January 2021? And I hope most of you are, but if I have listened to the gentleman a little bit, there's still a lot to be done. And who is joining us today? We got Ben Geary, who's the Fleet Statutory Manager of Döhle Yachts, and it's got an impressive CV, which I'm not going to read out completely, but everybody's free to ask him more about himself. And we got Gerhard Aulbert, who's the Global Head Recycling EU Certification of DNV GL. So some heavy caliber speakers today, and I think this topic deserves that as well, to be honest. So questions are: what do you need to know about the IHM certificates, the latest news on managing compliance of your vessel, and common issues with the certification process? Quite a bit, but Ben, I think it's a topic that's important, right? Why is it important?
I think it's just generally important for us as Dohle to just kind of make sure everyone is aware of IHM and what is coming. I think the key that you'll see in the presentation that both I and Gerhard talk about is the deadline date of 2021. That's when it's coming into force. And we just basically want to use this webinar to make sure guys are aware, what the process is, how you get the paperwork on board ready for 2021. And so, yeah, using you and that being able to talk on this webinar is fantastic. So I want to thank you very much for giving us that time to do it.
Fantastic. Our pleasure is all ours. We couldn't do it without, I could do 100 webinars myself, but I think I would lose audience after the first one. So thank you for joining us. Good. You want me to start up your presentation for you?
Yeah. Do you want to fire it up?
I will fire it up. Here we go.
So yeah, first I think, just thank you, Onno and A-Crew, for allowing us to talk on this webinar. And also, guys, thank you for logging in to take the time, your busy schedules, to come and listen to us. Bear with us because I'm still getting used to the whole webinar of talking to myself in a room rather than an audience. But yeah, today, as Onno said, we're talking about the inventory of hazardous materials. So what I want to do to kind of kick things off is just do a little poll, where, as Onno kind of highlighted, we've got the chat on the right-hand side of your screen, where we're going to use that to kind of give your input, because it'll be a quicker way of doing it. And guys, also, if you've got any queries or questions throughout, please just drop them in the chat on the right-hand side. Onno's going to monitor that and give Gerhard or myself a big kick if he wants to ask us a question. So I just want to start with a couple of easy questions, really, of just getting an idea from you as the audience, how much you're aware, what you're going to be doing over the next year. So the first question is, how many of you intend to operate in and out of European ports next year? So this is key. So again, just drop in a chat saying, yes, I am, if you are. because again, it gives us an idea of how many of you are going to be in and out of Europe next year. The next question is how many of you are aware of IHM? So again, you're on this webinar, which may be indicating that you may have an idea of what it is. You may have a lot of idea, or you may just want to get an understanding of what the process is and how it works. So again, please drop your comments in the chat. Have you started the IHM process? Okay, so again, what I'm going to be talking about to kind of kick this off is an understanding of where it comes from and why it's even here in the first place, but then also the basic process and procedures of how it's going to work. Also, how many of you are sat there today who have completed the IHM process? Oh, blimey, the lights have gone off in my room. How many of you have completed the IHM process and have certification and approved IHM manuals on board? So I'm sitting here because maybe you've got a couple of queries that you'd like to ask class or myself as we move forward. So have we got any chat? Looks like a few people are saying hello. Some of them, yeah, definitely going to be operating in European ports. Okay, so I think the key for us to take away from this is, guys, as Onno highlighted, this is a webinar for vessels over 500 tons. That's what it affects. And the European ports, if you're operating in European ports and you're over 500 tons, then this will affect you, okay? It doesn't matter whether you're a charter boat, doesn't matter whether you're a pleasure boat, it doesn't matter which class society you're using or even what flag you are. If you are over 500 tons and in fact, plan on visiting European ports next year, then this will have an impact on you. So what I'm going to do is just go into what IHM is, okay? So it's just a bit of a brief background of why we have it and where it comes from, okay? So IHM is the Inventory of Hazardous Materials. And it basically comes from the big focus of ship recycling for anything over 500 tons. So guys, you've probably seen the social media of these big container ships, etc., being run straight up the beach, and then some guys wandering down the beach with acetylene torches and start cutting it up. Obviously, with the way the world is now and the environmental concerns that people have, the shipping industry just couldn't go on like that. So for a while now, the IMO and others have been looking at how they can look at ship recycling, which is basically thinking about how the end of life of the product and how you're going to get rid of it. So it kind of started with the IMO and the Hong Kong Convention, which is still yet to be ratified, and that is still being worked on. But what we're focusing on today, and that's what the conversation is all about, is the EU ship recycling regulation. So basically this is working in line with the IMO Hong Kong Convention, and it's like for like. There are a few materials and components that are slightly different, but the process is the same. And you can argue, why are we looking at this today? Because of the application date. Okay, so this has been around for a while, and I know Gerhard may give you a bit of a timeline on it, but the application of when the paperwork needs to be on board your vessel is the 1st of January 2021. Okay, so we haven't got long. The next point is how many vessels this will affect. Now, you may have read in the paperwork or have seen presentations where there's a number of about 16,000 been kicking around for how it will affect Europe, the EU side of it. We've spoken to an awful lot of hazmat experts, and bearing in mind this is shipping. So this is everything that floats over 500 tons, not just the yacht market. So if you take in non-European flag vessels as well, then the figure jumps up quite substantially, and we're looking at around 30,000 plus vessels that at some point throughout their life will now go into a European port. So they will require the paperwork. Basically, what you need to understand is IHM is split into 3 parts, okay? So it's looking about the materials on board, it's looking about how you're going to recycle it and the process that it takes. But what I'm going to focus on today is part 1, okay? So this is the bit which is about hazardous materials inherent in the structure and fitted equipment. So these are the things that are on board that are going to be affected. So they're going to be looking at things like asbestos, okay? Ozone depleting substances, PCBs, PFOSs. Now, I'm not a hazmat expert, so some of the materials I can't even pronounce that they're going to look for. But generally, when you start to talk about asbestos and other areas and the ozone depleting substances, these are substances that are generally found in your engine rooms and their technical spaces. They're not going to be taking up your wooden lacquer on your owner's deck, okay? But they are going to be looking for various materials. So that's the kind of background. And some of you may ask, well, why are yachts involved in this? You know, some of the yachts that you've seen around are 80, 90 years old. And that's true. They are a fantastic condition and they are still loved and looked after. But either in my generation or even in my children's generation, at some point, that vessel is going to have to go to be recycled. So these IHM manuals, which basically is a document showing where potentially there is hazardous material on board. And it's not dangerous goods that you may be storing. It's the hazardous material within your components. That document, the IHM, will stay throughout the life of the vessel. Okay, so it's going to be a document that you keep on board like your other class bits of paper that will then keep with the life. So when it does go for recycling, it can then be looked at to see what kind of safety equipment people might need or material or machines to take the materials apart. So how on earth are you going to go about getting the IHM on board? So we can start that by, it's broken down into simple processes and stages. Okay, so the first one is the pre-survey plan and document review risk assessment. Okay, so it sounds a lot, but this is basically collecting data. Okay, so it's collecting the information. So if you things that you want to be looking for: ship specification, general arrangement, machinery arrangements, spare parts and tool lists, piping arrangement, accommodation plans, fire control plan, fire protection plans, insulation plans, international anti-fouling certificates, data sheets, type approval certificates. Okay, so you may be sitting there having lunch right now and thinking, okay, we haven't started this, but that's something you can do when you get back to your boat. Yeah, you can allocate someone, start to collect that information. Okay, because the next point is you're going to have an onboard survey by a hazmat professional. Okay, so these 2 points are very linked because your hazmat professional is going to look at what they may call a VSCP, which is a visual sampling check plan, or they're going to work with you on a plan of how they're going to come on board and check samples and take samples. Okay, but they're also going to help you. They're going to give you guidance on the kind of materials and where they may be found if you're not sure. And people may look at this and go, oh my God, they're going to start hacking apart my vessel. You got to bear in mind that when we've spoken to our hazmat experts, and maybe Gerhard can talk a bit more, but they're basically about the size of your thumb, maximum. Okay, but they're going to collect these samples from various bits. And also there is a document on dictates how many samples they take from each area and of what materials. What then happens is the samples are sent to an approved laboratory for testing and return. So what they're doing is they're sending off these samples to confirm that the materials they think they have in that substance are actually in that substance. Okay, so they go through to a number of approved laboratories. Once you have that back, I've written here IHM completed. What that is it's the manual gets completed. Okay, so you're basically hazmat professionals will collate that data and put it into a document. And again, that's structured. When we talked earlier about the IMO and the EU regs, it's a very structured process that it follows. So they will complete that for you. Then what happens is it has to be approved by a classification society. Okay, now it doesn't necessarily have to be the classification society that you are classed with. You know, generally IACS members, any of them have a qualified approved specialist that can review this, but it needs to go off to them to be approved. Then what happens is once it's been approved, basically what class will insist on or look for is being onboard verification. So they ideally want to come back and check that the manual that you've submitted is actually what is on board, and they want to double check it. Okay, so it's 6 steps, and wherever you look, those steps are generally the same. It's very structured. The whole point Dohle want to do this talk and be part with ACREW and DNV on this is all of us want to just make sure you're aware, because the concern I have over this is time. If you have a look, you know, when we've done it and on the vessels that we've had to date, it generally takes about 2 weeks to collate the data, because the data you're collecting, you may have on board, you may have from, you may need to go to the shipyard, you may need to go to your management company, you may even need to ask the manufacturers. So it takes a bit of time to collect that information. You're then going to have your hazmat professional on board. Now, one thing I would say here is when you are looking at getting a hazmat professional, try and find one that has got a marine background, okay? Because you're gonna, when we talked earlier, there's some of these substances like asbestos. So there's an awful lot of hazmat professionals out there, and a lot of them are coming from the land-based side. So they're not really aware of, let's say, the marine environment or understanding the components that are specific to marine equipment, but also just general things like understanding a machinery room layout drawing and understanding where pumps, etc., may be. But when we've spoken to our experts, they reckon it'll take about 2 days on board. Now that's worst case. So that's on some of the bigger yachts that you see. But either way, you've got to find time to fit that in. Now, in this crazy world of COVID-19, where we're not sure we should be, the season should have started, everyone should be very busy. Things are opening up now, so it's going to start to get busy. You have to start to plan that in. And again, it goes back, working with your professionals, finding if they can travel, where they can travel, and getting on board. The samples will then be sent away to the approved laboratory for testing and returned. Now, generally, when we've spoken to the experts, again, it's about 3 to 4 weeks currently for that, because you've got to bear in mind, it's not just the yacht world that are using these approved laboratories, it's the marine industry as a whole. So there are very few approved laboratories. So it's 3 to 4 weeks. Generally, it's a week to get the manual complete. So put in that process, as we talked about earlier, and ready to be submitted. And then again, you've got about 3 to 4 weeks with class. So, depending on which class you speak to, and Gerhard might say something different, but generally you're looking at around 3 to 4 weeks to get that manual back. And it's important that your hazmat expert is following the process, because the structure of the manual, the way it is, if it follows the right process, it makes it very easy for class to kind of review that and submit it back. Then you have the onboard by the Classification Society, generally takes a day, okay? Now there's 2 points what we're looking at on the screen at the moment. Is the 3 to 4 week brackets. They're the approved laboratories and the Classification Society. Those 3 to 4 weeks are what we're talking about currently, okay? So when we talked about the deadline of the January 2021, I've worked in class societies where we've had to meet, or the industry has had to meet deadlines. We're human beings, okay? So naturally, things get delayed. Either we've got a refit, or we've got a charter, or we'll do it next week because it's easier. You push the boundary. What happens is, as you get closer to the deadline, the amount of work for these class societies and for the labs goes up. Therefore, their lead times take longer. I mean, if you look at the times you've got on the screen currently, if you started today, you're looking at around mid-September for you to get your certification. So that's the kind of reason why we are, promoting this, as I've said before. It's mainly just to go and just make you aware, make the industry aware that if you are over 500 tons, you need to get involved now. So some of the key points that Gerhard and I want you to take away from this chat, and A-Crew will do as well, is that the IHM manual stays with the vessel throughout the vessel's life. Okay, so once you've done the hard work and you've got the document on board, and again, Gerhard will talk to you about whether it's a certificate or a statement of compliance and what they look like, they will be on board for the life of that vessel, okay? And you require a designated person, either on board or ashore, but someone who is going to basically look after it. So they're going to monitor it and make sure it's kept up to date. And when we say up to date, well, what does that mean? Because you can do anything. So any refit work or any modification work you do will have an effect. So if you change pumps out, if you look at doing engine modifications or complete overhauls of the interior, those materials that you are swapping in and out, the components that you're swapping in and out, may have an impact on the inventory of hazardous materials. So that document will need to be kept up to date. I emphasize it enough. I mean, make sure your hazmat professional has a marine background. I just think it's going to make life easier. And one better than that is to make them understand the yacht world. We all know that there's a big difference between a container ship and a kind of a yacht. So if you've got a guy that comes on board in big steel toe cap shoes, dirty overalls, and is not going to give the yacht the attention it needs, just be wary of that. Again, class will do it, but also, us as Dohle and others, we've worked with a lot of hazmat professionals that are, should we say, yacht friendly. They've got marine backgrounds. They understand how your industry works or our industry works. And so they're there to be adaptable to assist in it. Your certificate that you get is going to then be renewed every 5 years by class. So they do it on behalf of flag, and it's just going to be part of your kind of classification process. So it will be reviewed annually by the class surveyors as they come on board. It's just going to be one of those documents that you kind of have to look after. And again, what they're checking for is if they know you've had an update or you've had a modification or a bit of a refit work, all they're going to be looking at is to check that that is kept up to date. And there are an awful lot of people out there that can assist you with this. The last thing, I suppose, is that this is going to be looked at by Port State Control. Okay, so it is going to become one of the checks they do. Now, no one really knows how Port State Control are going to react because it's not in force yet. But you've got to plan for the worst case scenario. So again, I think Gerhard will maybe give us a bit more, but you've got to bear in mind that these guys will ask to see this bit of paperwork. And if you don't have it, then they potentially could impound your vessel. They could potentially do other things. So that's a bit of an unknown. So for us as Dohle, we would say, just be wary of that. Do you want that as a risk? If not, then start the process. And again, you've got to the end of the year. Okay, so it's not like it's happening next week. But as I said, even if you started today, you're going to be looking at mid-September. And if it's all plain sailing to the end goal. Obviously, with COVID-19, there's an awful lot of things that are unknown at the moment. Can people travel? Are you going to have charters? Is the owner coming? When are they coming? What's happening? So again, getting those contracts with your hazmat experts early, starting those conversations early, just so that you can get a vague ballpark idea of when things are going to happen is key. Okay. Now, obviously, we're talking quite quickly. There's an awful lot of information here. I know that in the file section, and I think Onno will talk about it later, there's some information. Dohle's got some information. DNV have got some information that will assist. Obviously, this was pre-recorded, or will be recorded, sorry. So it will be on the website, so you can watch it again. And also, I know that DNV and ourselves have other videos that kind of break a bit more down. So I know that we've kind of asked for questions to be dropped in the chat. And my next slide, I believe, says questions. Look at that. So we'll either leave that to the end, and hopefully that kind of gives you a bit of background to what IHM is and where it comes from, and also the kind of process that you have to go through. None of it's rocket science, none of it's difficult, it's a time thing. Okay, so yeah, thank you very much for listening, guys, to my part, and I believe now I'm either going to hand you to Onno or over to Gerhard to fluidly to another presentation.
Good. Well, let's before thank you so far, Ben.
My pleasure.
It is a big topic, and before I'm just asking everybody, like, if there is any questions, please feel free to add them to the chats so that we can discuss them. But in the meantime, do you know from Dohle perspective? I know you manage quite a few vessels. Are your vessels all prepared already, or is
so
in process?
A lot of them have started the process or are going through the process. Some have the certification already. So yeah, we are aware. I mean, my background, I've come from the class societies and I've spoken to a few of them. There are an awful lot of other industries that are a lot further ahead. So like the cruise ship industry, an awful lot of them are pretty much complete of their entire fleets. So, and I know that the container ship world as well, they are a lot further ahead. I think that's the message that I've got. I don't know, Gerhard may be able to drop in as well on this, but I think the yacht world generally, I think, has been slightly behind the curve. It's not saying it's too late, but I do think that they're slightly behind the curve. So the more, we can get the message out there just to start the process, start talking to the individuals, because I think in a normal world, where you can just ring up someone and they turn up on your yacht the next day, that's great. Obviously, in the current climate we're in, it's a bit more tricky. I mean, it benefits class. Have got people around the world, and we know people that can get to various points in the world. I think it's just something that just start the process early. I mean, I sound like a broken record, Onno, but I think it's just, that's the message that we want to get out to everyone today.
Good. There's a question from Mark coming in. He said, would you see challenges in maintaining compliance with IHM after initial certification, meaning controlling what comes on board? Do you see any challenges there?
I don't think so. And I think, again, Gerhard may give a bit more, but it's all very structured. So the hazardous materials that you're looking for are very structured. So once you start to work with your hazmat expert and you get an understanding of what areas are going to have those materials in. And as I said to you earlier, it's generally going to be looking at the machinery kind of technical spaces. That's why they say allocate someone on board, someone that can get familiar with a bit of the rules and regulations. They can talk to their management companies and even be someone, you know, onshore, someone that's just going to maintain it, because all the materials you have now. So if it's a new vessel, it will come with all that documentation. You know, the suppliers of the materials, the component manufacturers, they're all aware of this. It's been around for a while. I mean, these rules have come in. It's only they're now coming into force from January.
Yeah, exactly.
So once you've got the paperwork on board, one, you'll have your manual, so you'll understand where your materials already are on board. So if you're changing out gaskets or pumps or whatever it may be, again, it's just making sure you document it. If you only do it once a year at the end, the day before class turn up, then yes, it might get a bit tricky. But if you've got someone that's just going to keep maintaining, keep collecting the data sheets and asking the questions, you know, if you're not sure, ask your class society, ask us or whoever, and they will always give you advice on what may be needed.
Thank you. Great. I think this is a good moment to switch to Gerhard. Gerhard, is there anything you would like to add to what Ben has just said, or would you like me to fire up your presentation?
I will touch on this in my presentation so we can continue.
Yes, so I'll just fire up your presentation and then we can take it from there. Good. I'll be muting myself again by keeping an eye on the chat. Please, everybody, feel free to comment. And Gerhard, it's all yours.
Yeah, good day to everybody. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to present this topic, IHM, Inventory of Hazardous Materials, to you. And yeah, yachts are a niche, but they are also important. And next year we have a game changer in this area, because the whole thing related to inventory of hazardous materials will become mandatory. And that is, of course, also our concern, similar as Ben has presented before. I would like to focus on three topics, actually. What are the requirements of IHM, and then how to manage it in a smoothly manner to reach compliance. And then I also would like to share a few experiences. Actually, DNV GL is involved in certification of IHM for almost a decade. So we have collected a lot of experience, mainly from trading vessels, of course, but this can also benefit the yacht segment, of course. Yeah, first, a quick look to the regulation again. Actually, the tricky thing is that we have two regulations in the industry. We have this Hong Kong Convention and the EU Ship Recycling Regulation. And mandatory regulation is the EU Ship Recycling Regulation. And therefore, we strongly recommend only to focus on this one. And the EU regulation affects all the European ports and also the EU flagged yachts, of course. And I also would like to highlight here that the EU Ship Recycling Regulation also applies to Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein. So if a yacht is having a visiting port in Oslo, it also must comply to the EU regulation requirements. And at the bottom of the slide, you can see the definition of ship actually is quite wide, and it covers almost all kind of installations which are cruising in the marine environment or which have operated in the marine environment. So also, for instance, laid up installations are affected by this regulation. Yeah, timeline very clear. The EU regulation has started to become applicable in 2016 already. And now we are here at the final stage, end of the year, all the vessels in operation and inclusive the yachts must comply to these requirements. And at the end of the discussion, everybody wants to know what kind of papers do we need to have on board. And here I would like to share with you a glimpse of what is required. On the left side, you see the certificate, and you can easily identify that the certificate has been issued on behalf under the flag, under authority of the specific flag. So that indicates that this is a statutory service which DNV GL is supporting based on our collaboration with the different flag states. And the EU regulation is relevant for the EU flagships and also for the yachts visiting European ports. Yeah, the certificate is valid for 5 years, and you have some identifiers here on the top, and then you have the reference to the relevant regulation. So this is the one certificate document you need to have, and this certificate will be accompanied by the Inventory of Hazardous Materials, which you can see on the right side. This is just the cover page, so it can easily have maybe 10 to 20 pages. And you have the credentials of the vessel here, you have the date of creation, and you have an identifier here on the top. And then at the bottom, you have a list of identified hazardous materials. Yeah, some of these hazardous materials are prohibited or restricted, and others you are definitely allowed to have on board, but there is a requirement that they are listed in this inventory. Yeah, as I said already, next year, PortSec Control will definitely start to check on this certificate because it's a statutory certificate. And according to the regulation, a vessel can be detained if the respective certificate is not on board, or if in case it is invalid, or if the inventory is not according to the actual situation on board. Yeah, how to manage the compliance? Actually, here as a summary, again, the different steps during the preparation phase of the IHM. In general, this is the bottleneck now to get access to this kind of experts who are really experienced already to prepare this inventory of hazardous materials. You can easily imagine if you use experienced people, then you will have less problems with this requirement. And therefore, my strong recommendation is to look for DNV GL approved hazmat expert companies. We have approved around 26 companies globally, and we are working together with them for almost a decade already. So they know exactly the requirements for the trading vessels, and the requirements for yachts are exactly the same, actually, from the principle of doing the inspection work and preparing the reporting. Yeah, what is our final recommendation for the journey of compliance is, as I mentioned just now, to find a good supplier who can assist you to prepare the IHM. The method to prepare the IHM is based on document collection and also sampling and testing on board. So in practice, it's very often a combination of a collection of documents and certificates together with some sampling and testing. If this report is ready, then Class Society gets this report for approval. So far, our average approval time is 7 to 11 days. So it's a little bit faster than mentioned earlier. However, when it comes to the final mile of compliance end of the year, it will become more difficult. Therefore, our recommendation is to submit the IHM for approval to us latest end of October. Bear in mind, after the IHM approval, there is still a necessity to conduct class survey on board of your yacht. Yeah, and yeah, these are the main requirements for the compliance. Some common issues, actually, of course, you may be interested about the results of such IHM inspections. And here we have studied the results of around 250 IHMs from all kind of vessels, smaller, bigger, container, yachts, passenger vessels. And the outcome is, as you see here, these are the 15 substances which must be listed in the IHM. And by far, the most positive entries we saw, or we have identified for lead and lead compounds. Yeah, this is a logical consequence because all the ships have batteries on board, and most of the batteries are containing lead, and this is a part of the requirement to list them in the inventory. The second most substance which has been found is ozone depleting substances. These are the refrigerant gases and also cooling gases in the foams of the cooling chambers, which are quite often man-made on such vessels, actually. Yeah, but in addition, we also have some other hazardous materials in the middle, the ones which are not too easy to pronounce. For instance, this brominated flame retardant, HBCDD. This is a flame retardant, actually a chemical which is added to many products, especially plastic parts. And you can see in 15% of the IHMs, experts have found this. This is not so dangerous or difficult. It's allowed to have this in the inventory. The only requirement for replacement is related to the asbestos. And based on these 250 reports, it turned out in half of this IHM's asbestos was found. And here we have a replacement requirement under SOLAS. And the asbestos volume which has been found was in a small amount, 5 to 100 kilos, I would say. And it's mainly has been found in gaskets. And gaskets can be easily replaced by maintenance personnel under certain safety conditions. Yeah, you need an expert who is monitoring this. That was mentioned earlier already. So I would recommend to assign a person who will take this task and to come up with a small procedure how you want to deal with this topic within your company. It should be part of the safety management system and risk management system related to your yacht. Yeah, many people think about the Brexit. It also makes an impact to the EU ship recycling regulation, of course. Until the end of this year, UK will still follow the EU ship recycling regulation, and effective next year, UK is considered as a non-EU country, and therefore the EU regulation next year will only apply to UK flagged yachts in case the yacht is visiting European or Norwegian ports. Recently, we have also seen some special instructions of some other flags. Here we have Marshall Islands. Marshall Islands also has quite a number of yachts under flag, and they have issued a marine notice making very clear that all the yachts above 500 GT and equal, irrespective registration service type, must have an IHM before end of the year. So this is a special instruction to vessels and yachts having a Marshall Island flag. Yeah, summarizing my points, I believe to still make it happen that you can receive compliance before end of the year, you should pick some experienced supporters for this IHM preparation and certification process. And I also would like to mention that because of the requirement that the IHM needs to be maintained over the life of the vessel, there is a recommendation from our side to consider digital way of IHM preparation and also management. So we have a tool for this. You can reach this tool via your customer portal, and then you can easily maintain your IHM, and also the initial survey and renewal survey will be much easier than doing this manually. Yeah. We also have a training scheme. So if someone of you is interested to gain a little bit more detailed information, then you can join one of our trainings, and then you will be ready for this task. There are some flags like Liberia flag or also Marshall Island flag. They have some requirements regarding the quality of the hazmat expert who is preparing the IHM. So joining this training, you will make sure that you can meet the requirements of the flag states. Yeah, this was my contribution so far, and now I'm very pleased to contribute to some further discussions and questions. Thank you very much so far.
Thank you so much, Gerhard. Intriguing, I must say, from my perspective, because there's like, do you think everybody is aware of the amount of hazardous materials that they carry on board? Because you've been mentioning that. Do you have any use cases on that?
Yeah, we got information from the trading ship owner community that almost half of them are either in the process of doing this, or they have at least created a program for this. So we still have a little bit of time, as I mentioned, until October, but it's time now really to go ahead with it. Even if you only have a few vessels or yachts under management, as Ben also mentioned, it takes a while to prepare everything. And if you're under time pressure, then it will become more costly also. So it's wise advice to have a good plan and to pick the right partners for this task.
Great. There's a question from Xiang Wai. Is IHM control manual required to be reviewed by the class?
Yeah, it has been mentioned that after 5 years, IHM certificate needs to be renewed. And the main checkpoint of the class surveyor is to look into the inventory, whether it has been updated over the years. So if you have had some changes on your yacht, then you need to record this properly in the inventory, and that will be checked before renewal. So if you have an IHM certificate and inventory now, and then you bury it in your files and pick it out again after 5 years, then you will fail to renew the certificate, and then you need to start the whole process from the beginning again.
Okay, so that's a proper warning then, to make sure that that's up to date. Good. I think if I'm looking at the chat, it's very quiet in the chat, which means probably that a lot of people are thinking, I don't have any questions because I still have to start with the whole process. So I'm reckoning that that there's a few notes made. I'm sharing the files now that like the Dohle file, I've got it here. You added 2 files, right? Didn't you, Gerhard, for DNV GL, didn't you? Can you press share on those?
Yes, I added a leaflet about the general process for IHM preparation and certification. Mm-hmm. And I also added a brochure. We have a class notation also for compliance with this IHM requirements. And there are some ship owners who like to have it in the class notation that the vessel has a proper IHM certificate, and for that purpose we can also create a class notation for recyclable, and that is based on the requirements of the EU ship recycling regulation. The process is the same. So if you go for the IHM, in addition, you can get the class notation.
Fantastic. Jennifer says it was super informative and the material was so well covered, so no questions from me. That's a compliment. Sometimes, because this is a very factual presentation that you're giving, it's clear. It needs to happen by the 1st of January. These are the steps to go there. There's not a lot of discussion room, right? It's how it is.
I mean, I think as we said, it's not rocket science. What the process is not difficult. It just takes time to collect the information. I mean, as Gerhard pointed out, they've got an app. There are apps that you can be used. Again, we use it because, again, the yacht industry, especially more than probably most of the other marine industry, is very Apple, shall we say, Android friendly. A lot of stuff's done on the iPads, on the iPhones, etc. So finding a market where you can help, so when we talked earlier about starting to collect the information now, if you work with your hazmat experts, an awful lot of it, you can start to use these apps to take the photos of the material. You can put a general arrangement plan in it, so you can kind of say which room it was and where the material was, and literally just send someone around taking pictures. So again, it's all about getting the information to the hazmat professional who's going to work with you about that onboard inspection. Because as Gerhard said, the difficulty we've got in this time is just the COVID restrictions, how the world is on travel and timings, and also, guys, how your yachts are going to be used. I mean, I imagine your owners or your charterers are itching to get on board and get people on it if you've not already started. So it's, again, balancing that around your busy schedules about getting these people on board.
Fantastic. Gentlemen, it was an honor to be with two gentlemen who are so knowledgeable on this topic. I am pretty convinced that this will be a huge video that will be replayed very often, especially closer to the date 1st of October, because I believe that's a bit of and that's what I took out of it. If you haven't applied by the 1st of October, that's when you're going to start running out of time. So
and I think, I mean, that's key. Like DNV said, that's when they will expect manuals to be submitted. So that's when they need the manual for their poor guys that are all the approved authorizers of these manuals to get the work done. There's an awful lot of work done to get the manual to a stage where it can be reviewed by class and it's reviewed effectively, that they're not missing information. So again, when you look at the schedules we've set, that's assuming it's a smooth sailing process. So again, it's key. Find your hazmat experts that understand what they need to do for the marine environment.
Thank you so much. Gerhard, any last words from you?
Yeah, I'm looking forward for all the opportunities which will reach my desk, actually, and I can promise approval on time.
Thank you so much. So everybody, thank you so much for joining in. I know it's beautiful weather outside, as well as in Hamburg, as in England, especially where I am in Palma. Well, you were waiting. So it's double the pleasure that people have taken the time to do this. We know that the vessels are getting busier again, at least with work. So it's quite a sacrifice constantly to be at the webinars. So thank you everybody for joining us. We'll be sharing the videos shortly in our website on social media, and I'm pretty sure that DNV GL and Döhle Yachts will share it as well to their audiences. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Gerhard. It's been
my pleasure. Thank you.
And have a lovely weekend, everybody.
Take care, guys. Stay safe. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.